Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 144. We have several things to recap and discuss just in our personal lives and about the shop and stuff like that before we get into the episode. So we'll do that real quick, keep it as brief as possible. Paul, how are you?
Oh, I'm so good. Normally I just say, "Oh, I'm so good, I'm so excited," and I move on. I know I've made the jokes previous weeks of like, "Oh, am I married yet?" because I was about to get married. Now, as of recording this time, not just trying to guess for the future, I am actually married. I have the ring to prove it. I am also in a new home, so I have a totally different setup, and I no longer have Link in the background from Legend of Zelda in the background of my video. All I'm getting to keep at the moment, because we have a smaller house, is the Roshar map, which will go up at some point. Right now, it is sitting just behind me. But super excited to talk about Mistborn and to be back and talk some with you guys.
Sounds great. We may be running into Paul internet issues for the first time in our history. We'll see how that goes.
That is true.
Eliot, how are you?
I'm doing great. Not quite as great as Paul, but still good. The reading is getting exciting. I thought last episode, maybe 2 episodes, that we were maybe Sander Lanching. I think I was wrong. I think the Sander Lanching begins now, like right now.
For those of you who've climbed mountains, specifically 14ers, you'll always know about that false summit, so at the end of part 3 we had that false summit of the army has been disbanded rapidly. What's the rocket term, Eliot, that they use when a rocket explodes? Unscheduled rapid disassembling or something like that.
Yes, a rapid unscheduled disassembly.
There you go. That's my favorite term for a rocket exploding. But yes, we are well and truly beginning a Sander Lanch for the Final Empire in this chapter. Let's roll a quick intro, and then we can have Eliot summarize our chapters.
Should I do the mug first or after his thing?
Go ahead and do it now.
All right, I'm gonna butt in before Eliot does his summaries. First off, to say I've been just chuckling about the rapid, unexpected disassembly that that makes me really laugh. Maybe I said the words again already. However, we have some really exciting news. Aside from all the other exciting news that we've said so far, we have a new shard bearer to shout out. I also have a whole host of new mugs that I'm super excited for these coming weeks to share. So, our good friend here now, Juan. I really, really apologize. You cannot see her name well because of the glare, and also because I really had to try hard to tape this onto this mug. This mug is the moon, and it is very uneven, and nothing would stick to it. And so I apologize about that one. It's a really low quality job here, but for a very high quality person. So I apologize for that, but we're super grateful for your support, and having a shard bearer in our midst always makes a great ally. So we're really grateful for that. Also, a side note as well is a quick shout out to our new store we have, our new merch store. Make sure to check it out. I believe the link is in the description. If not, if Trevor wasn't planning on that, then he has to do it now because I'm saying it.
If it wasn't in the description, I'm just doing a poor job of running the YouTube channel, so it better be in the description.
That's fair. That is really true. I actually, right before I left and had my wedding, I got my mouse pad in the mail. By mouse pad, it's more like a blanket. It's huge, and it covers almost my whole desk. My desk isn't that big. I think it's like 32-ish, 36-ish inches wide. I chose the large size. There are more normal size mouse pads for people who prefer that. I will post some pictures and maybe a video in our Discord here in the next coming days whenever I have a moment. But it is awesome. It has our art print on it. It's amazing. If you haven't checked out the store, go ahead and just check it out. There's basically anything you could think of with some cool art on it. So everyone loves that and Stormlight. and Shard Bearers in one. So thank you so much for your support. I feel like this is my longest little mug talk I've had, but I'm going to pass the reins over to Eliot. It's just an exciting time. So really
Thank,
grateful for everyone who follows us and we get to talk with. So
thank you so much, Juan, for supporting us on Patreon. He also ordered a bunch of stuff off the store the same day that he signed up to be a shard bearer. So we really appreciate your support. Elliot, you want to go ahead with your summaries?
I got it. All right. Mistborn, The Secret Empire. For this episode, we read chapters 29, 30, and 31. So just to give us a brief summary to level set us all. 29 jumped in with Vin finishing reading the journal that Sazed has been translating. She got all the way to the end. She then goes and talks to Sazed about the journal a little bit, and then a little bit more about feruchemy as well. Let's see, elsewhere in the crew, they get a map from Marsh with the locations of all of the soothing stations. And they talk a little bit about that. Chapter 30, Vin goes to what is the final ball, essentially, at Keep Venture. Ellen is kind of giving her the stiff arm throughout the ball. Vin does get some information out of Kliss and finds out that Ellen is going to be assassinated. Vin does jump into action and is able to save Ellen by killing Shan, who apparently is a Mistborn. Mic drop right there.
Yes.
Chapter 31, Vin survives that encounter, makes it back to the hideout. The crew is able to take care of her, bandage her wounds. She and Kelsier test out a new ability that they've kind of stumbled on, which is Vin and apparently the Inquisitor's perhaps ability to sense allomancy through copper clouds, and they
Yeah.
talk about the implications of that. And then the chapter 31 kind of wraps up with Ellen figuring out that Vin is a ska thief. Dun dun dun.
Big reveal for not us.
Right?
So there's quite a bit happening in these chapters. I feel like chapter 29 is kind of just a recap or a recap chapter that we've had throughout the book, and then we just start going right at chapter 30, and it doesn't slow down. So
I actually have several questions on 29. I don't know if you
yeah,
have
go
something
ahead.
you wanted to say, Trevor, but if not, well, okay. So we learn about feruchemy, right?
Yeah.
So we know that our like two magic systems here are like allomancy and feruchemy. And first off, I feel like those are kind of funny names just in general. We had the whole talk about allomancy, and Trevor just
I don't know what you're
realized
talking about.
necromancer, all the mancers, and alloy together, all the things, right? I was really curious to get Eliot's perspective on this as our like first time reader here on feruchemy and like what you learned, what you think about it, just kind of general thoughts on feruchemy.
As always, I'm enjoying the deep dives into the physics of these worlds. I always get really excited when they start to explain how the magic works or how the world operates differently from Earth, the world that we know it. And feruchemy is no exception. I've I've actually been I knew we were going to get a lot about magic. That was one of the things I was most excited about for the book series, but I've even been surprised at how much we've gotten because we have allomancy, which is this full like fleshed out thing, which until one of these chapters here, until chapter 31, I thought I understood allomancy pretty well. And then feruchemy is like, I don't know, a whole nother system on top of that. And so we're going from one really cool, really clever, fully fleshed out magic system to, but wait, there's more. And feruchemy is like this whole like standalone method as well. I'm very curious about it. I feel like we don't have nearly as much understanding still about feruchemy as we do allomancy, but I say that, and yet in chapter 31 here, we kind of get a whole surprise moment about allomancy a bit. So maybe I don't understand either one, but I'm fascinated by them.
Isn't it kind of neat that we actually get these explanations? Like just
Yeah,
in general, I feel like this, like we've said this before, Mistborn is very different from how the cadence of like Stormlight Archive is. generally, in that it's way more clear on what's going on up front. Where sometimes there are other stories you have to wait a long time, and that's a really, really neat thing. But
There's
the art.
there's an extremely relevant Brandon Sanderson lecture video that I would like to reference here, but it's a minor spoiler for Mistborn Era 1, like the entire thing. So I can't talk about it, but I wish I could. And that's my contribution to the discussion.
Your contribution was Rafo, pretty
Yes.
much. On a question we didn't even ask. You're like, totally wish I could say this, but I can't.
If you know,
And then,
you know.
and then just
in the
leaving us to
comments.
hurt.
Yep,
Well,
exactly.
Leaving Eliot to hurt.
And
well,
you, because
I still don't know what your comment would have been.
Right.
So all you did was bring pain.
Correct.
Harm, Trevor. Thank you.
You're no problem.
Speaking of
real quick
pain
before
and
we
harm-
leave,
before this is my really poor transition.
Great
Go ahead,
segue
Eliot.
into what you were about to talk about. But go ahead, Elliot.
to completely stall your attempted segue, actually, just real quick before we leave feruchemy, I did want to say that I was intrigued by the importance in feruchemy of balance.
Yeah.
Sazed talks about this of in feruchemy, it's a give and a take. You only get out what you put in. It's a storage mechanism, essentially. You can pour strength into something to get strength out of it, or you can pour memories into something to get memories out later. It's not allomancy where it's gather resource, deplete resource to achieve whatever force you're going to be. That one's allomancy is more of like a supply and demand sort of thing, whereas feruchemy is more of like a seesaw. It's a balance. You can kind of go this way and then you can go back the other way, or maybe a pendulum.
The great example they had in this chapter, Sazed kind of offhand mentions age as something that you can store and use. And Vin says, whoa, hold up. You can make yourself you can make yourself young? And then Sazed says, yes, but you can't really, that's not very useful because then you have to be old later or earlier, right. Or at some point you have to be older than the young part. So that nobody's really found a use for that, but it is possible.
Right? Yeah. My question from this is maybe I need to go reread that again, which is what I say often. Are there like limits on what you can and can't feruchemize? So it's like we know it's commonly used with like strength, right? Like you can make yourself kind of feeble and like store up strength to use later, similar to how like pewter works, but different, but like similar effect, I guess, right? You can do that with like, can you do that with like intelligence too, or like things like that? Or like,
I guess it just depends on your definition of intelligence. Like IQ points? Like, could you be really dumb for a while and then be really smart?
Like mental capacity, emotional intelligence, like things like that. Does that make sense? Like,
are you referencing something that we shouldn't be talking about?
I'm not referencing anything right now, but there's kind of an ambiguous question. Like, not just intelligence. Like, could you do anything? Could you do like, I don't know, similar to how like we see all the elementic metals work? Could you do it with like your eyesight or like your touch, your sense of smell, like your senses, right? Like, could you do stuff like that? We see it with strength, right? But like,
I don't know the answer to your question, but if I were to theorize, I would probably say if you had the proper metal for it, yes. That would be my guess. Is that
makes sense.
Specific metals store specific things, right? So if you found the proper metal to store whatever you're trying to store, feasibly possible, yes. That'd be my guess.
I think you're right. I kind of forgot about the metal granting that aspect, which is why you have like copper mines and all the things.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's something that I was thinking of, like, you know, what if you used like, what would aluminum do or something? Could you do that, or like some random other metal? You know.
Yeah. You want to get back onto your pain and suffering segue?
Yes, I'm glad. I'm glad y'all stopped me because I thought that was a really funny segue, but it was jumping too far ahead at the time. I'm gonna jump a little farther ahead into chapter 30, if that's all right with y'all. Speaking of pain and suffering, let's talk about Shan Alariel. Um, so I remember something I noticed definitely different this time as a rereader compared to my first time was honestly just simply slowing down and reading it in a more like straightforward way. When I read Mistborn, especially book 1 initially, it was like a couple chapters here, a couple chapters there. It wasn't like as fluidly forward.
Yeah.
Um and so I didn't remember who Shan Alariel was, I guess. Like
Yeah.
I didn't put together that that was that mean girl from the ball, like
Right.
the girl who was like betrothed sort of to Ellen, like fiance or whatever. I don't know what they actually were, but like they
They
said they'd
they
get
were
married or
engaged.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yes. Um so I didn't actually realize this was her until this read through, which was just kind of crazy. Like what the heck, what was she doing,
Yeah.
But this whole like fight scene was really really awesome. This is like we see like kind of an ATM versus ATM battle, which is really really cool. And also like I have to not think about it too much. I feel like it breaks my mind when I think about it too much. There's like all these like images that break off, but then I'm like, if they start moving toward one of them, then do they come inward or do a whole host of new ones? Are they always popping up? I just had to stop thinking about it
Yeah.
personally.
I it's one of those things where I feel like visual adaptation, you could go a lot of directions with interpreting that. And I have no idea what would look the best visually on screen. It could just look like a mess. Like if you did it incorrectly, like in my head, it doesn't make sense. So portraying that on screen, I think is going to be challenging, not impossible, but you'd probably have to dial it back into like, you're seeing like 4 illusions that of like the future instead of what they describe as like 200 or whatever it is.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking in like a realistic sense, like imagining if this were real life and you're burning ATM and someone else is, the possibilities seem like endless of
Right.
what the person kind of could do. So I'm thinking it looks almost like a kaleidoscope of just like images, like always new ones coming, always old ones leaving, like all this stuff just beyond recognition. But in like a fantasy sense, it makes a lot of sense that it's like 10, 15 images pop out of like things that they might do, like feasible options, not like possibilities, if that makes sense. um and so I was thinking about that in this fight, but really cool, really like picking up the pace. um yeah, it starts to get real action packed with this.
I loved seeing how creative Vin is
Yeah.
with her allomancy. I've talked before about how allomancy is really complicated, and to be a good Mistborn, like you got to be quick in your thinking. You've got so many tools at your disposal. You got to get real creative real fast. It's like video games with too many abilities that overwhelm me real fast and I lose. But that's not saying a lot because I lose a lot of video games anyway. But Vin is really good at this sort of thing, and it's fun to watch the creative ways that she solves problems. And I loved how she defeats Shan at the end of it too, where Vin preemptively, but before she gets rid, before she completely depletes all of her ATM, she extinguishes it on purpose, pretending like she's run out. And so then that tricks Shannon to thinking, aha, I've got her now. I can predict exactly what she's going to do. And then right at the key moment, Vin's able to bring the ATM back and surprise her. So a very clever way to surprise someone who can anticipate everything you're going to do.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I think this mechanic specifically is probably my favorite thing in this book from Brandon Sanderson and from a writing perspective. The fact that he's introduced to you this whole allomancy thing during the entire book, and now we're finally seeing it like in a full-fledged action sequences where the stakes are fairly high. And yet he's still able to surprise you with something that you weren't expecting so that the uh, action is very enjoyable. but it also doesn't feel like he's breaking his own rules. Like that seemed earned, what Vin just did there. Of wow, that was
Oh yeah.
really clever. I followed exactly what she just did, but it's not that like, oh, she came up with this thing to get out of her troubles, and I just hadn't introduced that to you yet. Um, so
Right. It's something that we as a reader could have absolutely thought of
right,
at this point, but the majority of people haven't thought through that. And so when it comes to you as a book, it's like, oh yeah, that's brilliant.
yeah, I I just remembered thinking that on my first read. I was really impressed with this scene of wow, that's really cool and really creative way to adapt these rules that you've just explained to me, that I followed you all the way through that action sequence and you didn't lose me, and that was great. Um, I was brought back to my first read of Mistborn, and I really enjoyed that. With this
In the
scene, go ahead, Elliot.
in the midst of all this, with the ATM burning and things like that, we found the scene.
Yes.
The scene I've been looking for, anticipating on the edge of my seat from before I read the very first words, because it's on the cover of the copy of the novel that I have. If you're watching us, you can see me holding it up. If you're listening, you obviously can't, but go check out our YouTube channel and you can see the picture. The paperback copy of the book that I have has artwork on the front of just a stained glass window being shattered. And it's just a very striking image from the very moment that I picked up the book. And so I've been very eagerly awaiting the scene where a stained glass window gets shattered, and it happened in chapter 30. Vin goes flying through a stained glass window, and it was suitably epic. I don't know why, but I was very sure it was going to be Kelsier that would be the one flying through the stained glass window. It just seems like a very Kelsier thing to do.
Yeah.
Like almost, I was almost expecting it to be intentional. Like Kelsey is going to make a statement by smashing the nobleman's stained glass window as he saves the day or kills the person or whatever. It was a little more simple in that it was Vin just needed a way to get out of the building, but it was cool.
With
It
the
is really
with the conclusion of this scene, our house war has officially begun, and all of the nobles flee the scene as Elend doesn't even know he was about to be assassinated by his former fiance. And then he evacuates the palace via carriage. He runs away in his friend's carriage with him, and he sends out a spy in chapter 31, um, that goes and spies on Vin and follows Vin from the or had previously followed Vin, not tonight. Had previously followed Vin to the Ska hideout, to Kelsier's hideout, and they tell Ellen she's a Ska. She's been going back here every night as opposed to going to Renews every night, and this is a full Ska like layer. We can't get in here. We can't hear what's going on in there. The whole thing is soundproofed. There's watchers that we've spotted in the windows and stuff. So Vin's cover is blown for Elend, but Elend actually takes it like as encouraging news that, oh, she's not a nobleman spying on me. She's just trying to rob me. Oh, that's great. And I don't remember. Jastes, is that who he's with? Jastes like, you're such an idiot. Like, why is this encouraging news to you? I just really enjoyed that scene.
it is odd, and it also got me thinking. This is just a really dumb thought that I had. But what are the odds that the two girls pseudo involved in liking Ellen are Mistborn? Not just like a misting or something,
Yeah.
but like Mistborn. It's like Mistborns are like ridiculously rare, and it's like if a house has a Mistborn, that's like a huge deal, like one or two, like really sets you up in a crazy like way, right? And then Ellen, like the two girls that have like shown interest-ish in him. The whole stuff with Chandelier seems odd and forced and not like a real love story, right?
Right.
But still girl associated with Ellen, and they're both Mistborn, which I just think is really crazy. What are the odds?
Not high.
Nope, not at all.
So it's a little funny too because at the beginning of the story, I was fairly confident in my prediction that Elend would be the Mistborn. I was waiting for that classic like Vin's a Mistborn, Ellen's a Mistborn. They don't realize that each other are Mistborn, and then all of a sudden you get this like funny, awkward middle of the night land on a rooftop. Wait, you moment,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and we didn't get that at all. It's the people around Elend that are the Mistborn, not him,
It's still
as far as we know.
plausible. He does seem fairly unmistborn-y though.
I'm yeah,
I didn't think Shan Alario was Mistborn though. Like, I mean,
right.
I remember there being this scene where Vin kills a Mistborn who's trying to assassinate Elend.
Yeah.
I just don't remember putting those pieces together. My first time of that is Shan Alario from the balls, like, like the whole connection there. So
I do think it's
I
a very
was
interesting cover though, that she purposely makes it known to everybody. Like everybody knows, oh, she's a soother. She
Mhm.
can get you to do
oh yeah.
whatever you want. She's a soother. But she uses that as a cover for being full Mistborn, which I thought was actually a really cool use of the magic system again by Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah. I was pretty surprised by Shan being the Mistborn, but I think it's just because I let my guard down. Like when the book started, I was suspicious of everyone. I was like, ooh, Mistborn. Ooh, that could be a Mistborn. Ooh, that person could be a Mistborn. And then by like halfway, 2/3 of the way through the book, I was, I gave up my hunt for Mistborn because we hadn't really met any. And so then when it finally came out as like, oh, there's a Mistborn, I was surprised.
it it was the only other thing I have to say about it is it did a really good job of hiding with her character because she's kind of you just kind of brush her off as the like
Yep.
pompous, bratty, like
Yep.
snobby noble girl who's just like rude to all the others, kind of like a bully almost, and and it makes sense that she'd be a soother, like, and just kind of push on people's emotions and like draw those kinds of reactions, right? But then you don't think of her like steel pushing and pewter burning and like all the Mistborn things, and like actually being like strong, like well trained, not just like a brat, right? Like actually pretty menacing, which is really crazy. But
When Vin returns to the lair, she actually kind of mouths off to the crew. The the crew kind of accuse her of like, why did you show our hand? Why are you running around as a Mistborn to defend Elend? And she talks right back to them and says, well, how dare you guys not care for all the ska that are around you and you're just trying to live as nobles without titles, is the comeback she has for them. How dare you guys live with all these riches and pretend that you are the common ska? You don't know anything about being a ska. I do. Um, and so I don't know. Her temper breaks there, and then she has a pretty laid back conversation with Kelsier afterwards. They actually end up disproving. I don't know if that's the correct word. Challenging Copper as a mechanic, which Elliot you mentioned earlier. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, this was an intriguing little scene. Vin is suspicious that the Inquisitors can sense her even when she's copper clouding.
Yes.
There's a verb there that I'm missing, but
I don't know why that's funny to me.
When she's
Whenever
clouding.
they're
no,
sensing me while I'm copper clouding.
no, there's a term for it. Smoking.
There you go.
Smokering? Smoking.
Mm-hmm. Smoking.
When she's burning copper and she should be able to protect and shield her allomancy, the Inquisitors seem to be able to find her anyway. And Vin now has a theory based on this. She thinks that the Inquisitors can still sense them. And this has kind of two implications. One, which is part of Vin's evidence, is that she can do it,
Yeah.
at least slightly. And she proves it to Kelsier here in this scene. Kelsier doesn't believe her. He's like, "No, that's silly." And Vin does it. She has Kelsier shield himself with copper and burn something else, and Vin can tell him what he's burning.
Yeah.
And it kind of blows Kelsier's mind there in a moment. He's like, whoa, man, that changes the game. Because then the second implication from this makes us revisit the whole Mayor betrayed Kelsier element of our story.
Yeah.
The whole Kelsier's wife Mare turned him into the Lord Ruler, because the only evidence, or the evidence that Kelsier had for that, was the Lord Ruler thanked her for giving them up or turning them in or whatever it was. Vin's new theory is, well, she was burning tin that whole time. And so she was, giving you away because the Inquisitors, or maybe the Lord Ruler himself, could sense that. And so we've got a little bit of a game changer, which is, this is what I was referring to. And it's like, I thought I understood allomancy. I thought I had a good hold on everything. It all had very logical explanations. You've got this metal, you've got the alloy of that metal, you've got internal, external, all these different kind of elements that fit nicely together. And then all of a sudden, Vin can break the rules, and the Inquisitors can break the rules. Why can they break the rules? I want to know.
I've been praising Brandon Sanderson, and I'm going to pick at it a little bit. One of the things that actually kind of bothers me about this mechanic is one of the reasons Vin has to think along the lines that she is the Lord Ruler's soothing powers. She said multiple times has pierced her copper, and like she still feels the Lord Ruler's influence over her. Why does Kelsier not come up with that? Or why does any Mistborn that is around the Lord Ruler not come up with that? Like, why is that unique to Vin, of she can feel the Lord Ruler soothing through her smoking? I would assume everybody else can still feel that, and maybe they just brush it aside of, oh, that's the Lord Ruler. But I don't know. That was one of the reasons why she was thinking along the lines she was. Turns out she's correct. Why has this not been thought of before by other people?
Yeah, it's a valid question that I feel like I can't really dive further into without some more knowledge, because there's kind of two options there. Either the other Allomancers do feel the influence of the Lord Ruler, and they're either ignoring it or not noticing it, or just, chalking it up to he's ridiculously powerful, or he's the god, or whatever it is. Or is Vin the only one that feels it?
Right.
I think she's mentioned this a few times, and Kelsier doesn't seem to have reacted too strongly to it.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a Vin thing. Maybe Vin is the only one that feels the Lord Ruler through her copper.
Which would raise a whole other host of questions.
Right.
I don't know. Anything else, gentlemen, for the episode? Before we get into Stormlight stuff, I do have some Stormlight stuff.
I had a Stormlight thing as well, but before we go that far, I actually did have a couple more things back in chapter 29. They're pretty small, they're short.
Before you do that, can I say one other thing about copper? It's
Yes.
my
Yeah.
last thoughts while we're kind of on the avenue of copper. It's not anything that profound, but I couldn't shake the feeling the whole time that we were talking about this, that like copper is the worst metal. If you're a misting, like
you're a
copper has to be
smoker.
the worst one, because it's like it's a really really cool thing to be like, my responsibility is keeping the whole crew hidden,
Yeah.
so they can't be detected, right? That's a good responsibility, that is important, that is powerful. But then it's like, oh, but strong allomancers could just see through it anyways, and so it's like there's no purpose then. Like what? That's got to be the most useless one then, if that's the case.
Right.
And I don't think that is the case. We've obviously seen that it is seems to be weird exceptions that we don't know yet, that can like sense things through copper clouds. But it still made me think, like, if people got figured that out, copper clouds, if you're a smoker, you're just kind of obsolete. Like, you're kind of, that's it. Anyways, that was a dumb thought that I'd had while reading this, and
That
I'm now
almost
sharing it with you.
that thought almost pushes me a little more towards maybe it's a Vin thing, because like you're right. Being the smoker, it is perceived as a very important job. The whole reason this Rue was able to pull together and do this job is because they have the world-renowned smoker clubs and his workshop, and they've
Yep.
been running this whole thing out of there, completely based on they've been doing this for over a year now, or something like close to a year.
And even before Kelsier used it, like this is a well-known hideout that you can rent. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so it's not like just a quizzer walks by and it's like, haha, you're trying to hide and you can't.
right.
Like it works. They've been able to hide this shop for a long time. So that almost makes me think maybe it is a Vin thing. Maybe there's something about Vin that's different, which then immediately jumps me to a follow-up thought too, which is, well, if Vin's different and then quizzers can sense her, could that potentially mean that Mare was also the same different?
Yeah.
That Mare was noticeable by the Inquisitors? Is there some kind of a link between Mare and Vin that is a common thread that is keying into this ability, perhaps?
And that's why the Lord Ruler specifically singled out Mare as opposed to like any of the crew that were burning Allomancy, Kelsier,
Right,
or whoever the other guy they had with them. Yeah.
right. Interesting thoughts. Do you have anything else on Copper, Paul?
Nope, that was my last copper thought.
All right. Well, before we kind of move to wrap up the episode or move into some of our Stormlight spoilers, just going back to chapter 29 really quickly, just a couple of small notes that I picked up on. In this chapter, Sazed unfortunately squashed a rather facetious theory that we had a long time ago. We joked quite a while ago that when Sazed saved Finn from the Inquisitor in the fortress, the description you read in the book is they heard a sound like a
Shattering
tree
branches.
boughs, yeah, shattering branches, and so I immediately jumped to the conclusion of, oh well, Sazed just saved her by dropping a tree on top of that Inquisitor. Well, unfortunately, here in this chapter, Sazed gives her a very detailed explanation of exactly what he did. And
Ah, he's
there's
lying.
even a moment in the story. Oh, there's a moment in the story where Vin like is disappointed. She's like, "Oh, that's all you did?" And Sazed's like, "What? Were you expecting something more dramatic?" And I said out loud as I was reading the book, I was like, "Yes, I was expecting something more dramatic. I wanted a tree falling from the sky on top of this Inquisitor, and no, you just like hulked up for a moment and then punched him, and that was it." Anyway,
Ah, he's lying. He's
he
covering up.
must be,
Doesn't want
must
people to
be.
know he used a tree.
Yeah.
But
That just
yet again, we
gave me flashbacks to that whole episode where we went on for like 20 straight minutes on that stupid tree.
And it made
we did.
me laugh when we did that because there was no thought that ever occurred to me along those lines.
There's nothing in the
And I feel like
outline
we
either.
talked
Like we just
yeah,
started talking.
I feel like we went on that for a long time and I was like, I think that's just a descriptive word choice. However, I see what you mean. Like, yeah, he could have, yeah, he could have picked up a tree.
And we tied it to
Yeah,
Stormlight. Oh, it was beautiful. It was
yeah,
beautiful.
exactly.
Anyway, yeah, after Sazed squashed our fantastic theory rather directly, the other thing in this chapter that I noticed was a little bit of a what I'll call a meta reader moment for me. There was another bit in this chapter where something that Vin was thinking like spoke directly to me, and I got to read it, and it'll make sense to some of our longtime readers. Vin is she's reading the journal, the logbook that they've been translating and reading. And this is just kind of some of her thoughts as she's digesting it. A part of her wished that she could visit such places, no matter how dangerous. Though the logbook didn't describe the Lord Ruler's entire journey, some of the marvels it did include the ice fields to the north, the Great Black Lake, the terrace waterfall. They sounded amazing. If only he'd put in more detail about what things looked like, she thought with annoyance. And
That's funny.
again, I set my book down and out loud I said, "Yeah," as soon as I read that. Because if you're a longtime listener of this podcast, then you know that my my primary, perhaps my only critique or request of Brandon is that I wish he would describe things more for me. I wish that he would take some time and tell me what the landscape of Scadrial looks like, that he would tell me what the landscape of Roshar looks like, and when there's a battle, he tell me more about what the armor looks like or the sounds that we're hearing, or some of those more sensory moments. And Brandon very intentionally doesn't tell stories like that. He's got lectures on his YouTube channel about how that's a very conscious writer's choice of his. He writes with verbs and not with adjectives, and that's just his style, how he does it. But it was just funny to read a moment in one of his stories that is my exact thought or critique about some of Brandon's works. It was enjoyable. I laughed.
Vin also, in that same dialogue, has frustrations with Sazed. And Sazed says, well, if you're getting this invested in a book, you might become a scholar. And Vin says, well, not if books end like this. This is a terrible ending. I want good endings. Please give me good endings. So that was funny to me.
Yep. Good stuff. That was all I had from these chapters.
All right. Sounds good. Let's go into Stormlight stuff. Paul, you used, I don't know if you intentionally phrased it this way, but because you phrased it this way, made me think of a specific character in Stormlight. Eliot, you wrote it. Go ahead.
Okay, so you guys started talking, and I had to jump down to the end of the template to write this down. We cleared Stormlight spoilers, right?
We
If
did.
you're not a
A
Stormlight,
bit
like, get out of here.
big Stormlight spoilers about to drop.
Yes,
Big,
massive, enormous.
big, massive Stormlight. So Taravangian. Wow. Okay. So Paul, you started talking about feruchemy and intelligence, and throwing out the idea. Well, could you store up intelligence and use it on a later day? That it seems like a very plausible question in the context of feruchemy. But as soon as you started talking, I was like, wait a second. There's an obvious character that does exactly that.
Yeah.
Like exactly that. He spends some of his time less intelligent, and then he spends other parts of his time overly intelligent. It's like, oh, is that coincidence?
Would y'all like to know a
It's
secret?
awfully similar.
Okay,
Please.
it is a great. I think it is a pretty darn smart connection to make there. It was kind of by accident. That's my secret. I was just like throwing out. I think I could think of with feruchemy, and then I said intelligence, and then I thought about it, and I realized, and I didn't want to go down it because we weren't talking about Stormlight, and starting to talk about that with Taravangian becomes a big spoiler. And then Trevor was like, anything particular in mind? And I was like, no,
Well,
no,
Not
no,
yet.
nothing. Yeah, but yes, no. I think this is something that could be talked about. I can't think of a time that I feel like I've seen feruchemy in Stormlight the way we see here, but it did get me thinking of, like, I understand the rules of you have to have a metal storage facility, whatever the metal to store whatever thing, right? But we don't know what all of our metals could do. Like, if you could use hypothetically any metal of whatever right alloy, is there something you could store? Like, could you store intelligence? Could you store, I mentioned, like, sensory things, similar to being like a tin eye, for example, right? Could you use tin to
Yeah.
store like good vision? Could you store, I don't know, artistic capability? I don't know. Like you name it. Could you store it in a metal using feruchemy?
Using the word artistic ability made me immediately jump to Soul Stamp. I would equate that to like knowledge of martial arts or something like that. But that's a different conversation. Specifically the Taravangian one. So what we've been told Taravangian's deal is he went to the Night Watcher, Cultivate. Was it Night Watcher or Cultivation?
He went to the Night Watcher, but met with Cultivation.
Did he?
Yes.
How sure are you?
Because I'm like 98. No, I'm thinking of Dalinar, aren't I?
Dalinar definitely did.
Dalinar goes. That's
But
what I'm thinking of.
You might be right, because Cultivation meets... Big spoilers. Cultivation meets Taravangian at the end of Rhythm of War and says that's part of all. This was all her plan, or something like that. So you might be right. You might be right.
I'm pretty darn confident that he meets with cultivation.
But yeah, so then it just becomes the question of, is cultivation using some feruchemic mechanic?
Okay, another question for you here. So you know how you can't access other people's like metal mines?
Uh-huh.
It is personalized to you. It's
Right.
not like shavings of a metal that you can ingest and burn with allomancy, right? It is specific to you. If if my metal mind was on you, Trevor, could I use its effects on you?
Could you make me weaker?
Yeah, like could I use the strength I've stored up and like physically put it on you and like make you stronger or weaker or things like that? Use the power that I've stored up on you. Because if so, then the intelligence thing, someone could be puppeteering Teravangian, but
Right.
that's a really crazy theory,
That
right? So
is a
that's what I'm getting at. That is a really ridiculous theory that I don't think is true.
right.
But like, what if someone is pulling on Teravangian's mental strengths without him knowing
The
some like
the
godlike
diagram would be somebody
amount?
else's, and they're showing it to Teravangian. Is that what the line you're going down?
They're just manipulating when he is super intelligent and when he's not,
Oh,
right?
okay.
When he's
And
super dumb.
it's not random, it's purposeful.
Could be.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, like if that were the case where you could okay, it's a lot of hypotheticals. It is first hypothetical is you can use your own metal mind on someone else. That is the first hypothetical. The second hypothetical is that someone is doing that to Teravangian intentionally, right? Which are two very big ones. But, I- right now, if those hypotheticals are true, then that is technically possible. If those are both true.
I I could also see another slight twist on your theory there, in that maybe it's Teravangian's metal mind, but somehow someone else has the on-off switch. Like
Okay.
it's it's all Teravangian's resource. It's all his intelligence. It's a swing in him, but either it's not intentional. He has no control over when he draws on it and when he's storing it. It just happens. Or is someone else like moving the knob?
Okay, something to add to this. So we know that Teravangian always looked back and he was like, I had the one like brilliant day where he like did the diagram or whatever,
Yeah.
right? This one brilliant day. And then now he's talking about how it's all kind of like a downward slope. Like it's not just straight down every day. It's like a downward trend. It moves up and down, but it is like a downward trend.
Yeah.
Maybe he like used up so much that in general he's just having to like recharge more, right? Like he's gonna have to recharge for a while because he used so much for the diagram
Mm-hmm.
that he's like he can only go up so high right now because he's just used so much that he has to like restore that, right? Logically that makes sense.
Yeah.
Except in my head, I think it has to work the other way. I think you have to preemptively store that up before you can go up that high. But I
Well,
mean,
but what if he
seems
did?
close.
What if he spent time lower that led up to that peak
Hmm.
that where he wrote the diagram, and now he's kind of back down, which
Yeah,
then leads you to, is he storing up for another one of those days? Has he been
that
spending
is really
a
true.
lot of time in the lower section of it? All of this slowly building up another metal mind to the
Or
point where Stormlight 5, we get another odium
Huge
infused
Todium
diagram
brilliant
day.
day,
holy cow. And
Yeah.
you can also go back to, this is somebody else's metal mind feasibly, that somebody else used all that time down, and then metal minded Teravangian,
Mhm.
whatever. Anyway,
What if it's Thydakar's metal mind?
I feel like that has
we
a lot of implications that I am not qualified to speak on at
yeah,
this moment.
Th-
Sorry, yeah,
Thydakar gets a special episode here in a little bit, not yet.
fair, fair.
Okay, something with probably not as huge implications. Did you all see the cameo in chapter 31?
The what?
Cameo.
The who? Did I not?
In chapter 31.
Chapter 31.
Look out for these things. Did I miss one?
This one's pretty hard. This one's, you definitely need a Coppermind, the website, not the
Okay.
not the in-world thing.
I bet the actual in-world one would be helpful, though.
So this one I actually spoiled for you guys back when we read this in Stormlight. And I pulled out Mistborn and read an excerpt. I don't know if you guys remember this. And I looked at Paul, I read an excerpt of chapter 31, and Paul, you're like, what is the context of that? And I didn't give it to you.
I think I know what you're talking about then, but I still don't remember.
So Elend employs a spy to go check out Vin, right? His name is Felt. F-E-L-T, Felt. The bodyguard that accompanies Dalinar to cultivation, his
That's what I was
name
thinking of, yeah.
is Felt.
Neat.
Nope, missed that one.
No idea what Felt has been doing, but he's slid around somewhere.
Is Felt the one... Oh man, I'm racking my brains. Dalinar goes to visit cultivation. Doesn't he grab one of his guards and he's like, hey, you know about the Night Watcher. You're coming with me.
Yes.
Is that Felt?
Yes. And there's an
Interesting.
offhand comment where Dalinar says, well, where are you from? Well, how do you know about the Night Watcher? And Felt just says, I'm not from around here. That's all he says.
Interesting. Is the correct term here world hopper?
That is the correct term, world hopper.
Intriguing.
Yes. There'll be a couple of more of those, which I get to point out to you at some point in the future. But that is the only one I will point out today. Anything else, gentlemen?
Not here.
All right, let's reconvene next week, and we will end part 4 in episode 145, which is next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
Farewell.
See ya, and thanks again, Juan. Much thanks.
Thank you.